Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive. And today, we're really going deep this time.
Oh, yeah.
Into the life of Manuel Noriega.
Fascinating guy.
This is a guy who went from being a CIA asset to a dictator.
Yep.
That the U.S. had to depose.
Hard to believe.
I mean, talk about a story with some twists and turns.
Yeah.
So we've got excerpts from a text that's going to guide this deep dive.
Right.
It focuses on Noriega's life.
Okay.
And this is going to be a wild ride.
Buckle up.
Through Cold War intrigue, U.S. foreign policy.
Oh, yeah.
The rise and fall of an authoritarian leader.
It's all there.
So.
It really is.
Yeah.
You know what's so captivating about Noriega is that he embodies this whole era.
Really?
Panama's location, made it absolutely crucial.
The canal.
During the Cold War.
Yeah.
That canal, major shipping route.
Oh, yeah.
And Noriega was right.
In the thick of it.
Right in the thick of it all.
Yeah, his story.
It really is something.
It isn't just about one man. It's about how global events and personal ambition
A potent mix.
can collide
in
some seriously unexpected ways.
Unbelievable.
Speaking of unexpected, how about this? Noriega was born in Panama City in 1934.
Okay.
And early on, he actually worked with the CIA.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
I mean,
it's wild.
It's wild, right?
He was an informant. Giving them intel on communist activities in Latin America. This was during the height of the Cold War.
Yeah.
So the U.S. was hungry for any advantage they could get.
I mean, it's incredible how the U.S., in their fight against communism,
it really is,
ended up empowering the very person who would become a major problem for them later on.
You can't make this stuff up.
It really makes you think about the long game.
Yeah.
And how actions can have these unintended consequences.
Absolutely.
Down the line.
And, the information he provided was sometimes quite valuable. There's one instance where his intel helped the U.S. track a Soviet ship suspected of carrying arms to Cuba.
Wow.
That's how intertwined he was with U.S. intelligence.
So we've got this guy,
Noriega. Yeah.
Working with the CIA, but at the same time, he's climbing the ranks in Panama's National Guard.
Ambitious guy.
Was this all part of some master plan? Or was he just playing both sides and seeing where it got him?
It's hard to say.
Yeah.
It's hard to say for sure what was going on in his head.
Right.
But one thing's certain.
What's that?
He was ambitious. By 1983, he was head of the Panama Defense Forces.
Wow.
And when the president resigned, Noriega saw his chance.
Yeah.
He seized control, becoming the de facto ruler of Panama.
Wait, so he didn't even try to get elected or anything?
Not at all.
Just straight up took over.
That's right.
Wow.
No elections, no fanfare. He just consolidated his power.
I mean, he already had the military under his thumb.
Yeah.
And from there, he started manipulating the political system to silence any opposition and cement his control.
That's how it's done.
So he's essentially a dictator now.
Pretty much.
But the U.S., who he used to work for, they're just okay with this.
Well, remember, this is the Cold War.
Right.
Panama with the canal was strategically vital to the U.S.
Yeah.
They were willing to overlook a lot of Noriega's shady dealings.
I bet.
As long as he was keeping Panama stable and aligned with U.S. interests.
So it was a classic case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
You could say that.
Even if that friend is running a dictatorship, it sounds like a pretty risky gamble on the U.S.'s part.
Definitely was. And like many gambles,
it
eventually backfired.
Uh-oh.
Throughout the 80s.
Okay.
Evidence started piling up about Noriega's involvement.
Oh, no.
And some seriously dark stuff.
Like what?
Drug trafficking, money laundering, you name it.
Wow.
He was using his position to enrich himself.
Of course.
And his inner circle.
Yeah.
And it was becoming harder and harder for the U.S. to ignore.
Yeah, I bet that caused some tension.
A bit.
To say the least.
Understatement.
You've got the U.S., who once relied on this guy for intel.
Right.
Now realizing he's become a major liability.
A huge liability.
Well, they do.
They tried to pressure him to get him to step down quietly. But Noriega wasn't going to give up his power that easily.
I'll bet.
He'd built a network of loyalists.
Yeah.
He controlled the military.
You're right.
And he knew he had enough dirt on powerful people, both in Panama and the U.S.,
I bet,
to make things very messy.
Yeah.
For everyone.
Yeah.
If he went down.
So this is where things really start to heat up?
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Things are about to get interesting.
Noriega is basically daring the U.S. to do something about it.
That's right.
And remember, Noriega wasn't just quietly running his criminal empire.
No.
He was becoming more and more brazen.
Bolder by the day.
Even harassing U.S. diplomats and soldiers.
Can you believe it?
Stationed in Panama.
It's true.
Things were escalating.
Rapidly.
Fast.
So
the situation's getting tense. Noriega's thumbing his nose at the U.S., and then things boil over.
Yeah.
What was the tipping point? What finally made the U.S. decide to take action?
Well, it all culminated in December 1989.
Okay.
With a tragic incident.
Okay.
A U.S. serviceman was killed.
Oh, wow.
And that was the final straw.
Yeah.
The U.S. government, already under pressure to deal with Noriega, decided they couldn't tolerate this any longer.
They had to act.
So
they launched Operation Just Cause.
Right.
Now, for those who aren't familiar, this was a full-scale military invasion of Panama.
Huge.
With the goal of removing Noriega from power.
That was the objective.
It was a huge operation.
Massive.
Tens of thousands of troops involved.
Yeah, it was a major undertaking.
And it was incredibly controversial.
Oh, absolutely.
While the U.S. framed it as a necessary action to protect American lives.
Of course.
And restore democracy in Panama.
Right.
A lot of people saw it as an overreach of U.S. power.
Oh, yeah.
A blatant act of imperialism.
A lot of people felt that way.
I can see how it would look that way.
Yeah.
Here you have this powerful country invading a much smaller nation.
Exactly.
It definitely raises questions about the U.S.'s role in the region.
Yeah.
And whether they were justified in intervening so forcefully.
It's a complex issue.
What was the international response like?
Well, there was a lot of condemnation from the international community.
I bet.
Many countries, especially in Latin America, saw it as a violation of Panama's sovereignty.
Yeah.
Even some U.S. allies
really
expressed concerns about the invasion.
I mean, it sounds like. While the U.S. might have achieved its immediate goal of removing Noriega, it seems like it came at a pretty steep price in terms of their international reputation.
Absolutely.
So they won the battle, but maybe not the
war.
Not the war.
The PR war.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also had lasting consequences for U.S.-Panama relations.
Really?
The invasion left deep scars.
I bet.
And those tensions persisted for years afterward.
Let's talk about Noriega himself during all of this.
Yeah.
What happened to him when the invasion began?
Well, he didn't just surrender.
No.
He actually went into hiding.
Where'd he go?
Seeking refuge in the Vatican Embassy.
What?
In Panama City.
Wow.
It was a bizarre situation.
Yeah.
You have this dictator accused of all these crimes, holed up in the embassy, while U.S. troops are searching for him.
That's got to be awkward, to say the least.
Extremely awkward.
So what happened next?
Well,
did they just wait him out?
It was a tense standoff.
I bet.
That lasted for about 10 days.
10 days.
The U.S. military surrounded the embassy, playing loud rock music 24/7.
What?
To try to force him out.
So they were using psychological warfare tactics.
They were.
That's pretty wild.
It was a strange and dramatic scene.
Yeah.
Eventually, though, Noriega surrendered to U.S. forces.
Okay.
And was flown to the United States to face trial.
I bet the U.S. government was relieved to finally have him in their custody.
I'm sure they were.
So what charges did he face?
He was charged with a whole slew of crimes.
Okay.
Including drug trafficking. Racketeering, and money laundering.
Wow.
His trial was a major media spectacle.
I bet.
This former dictator now standing in a U.S. courtroom.
Yeah.
It was a huge moment.
Huge.
Not just for the U.S., but for Panama as well.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
This was a man who had ruled their country with an iron fist.
Absolutely.
And now he was facing justice.
He was.
So what was the outcome of the trial?
Well, he was found guilty on most of the charges.
Okay.
And sentenced to 40 years in prison.
40 years.
It was a landmark case.
Really?
Demonstrating that even dictators aren't above the law.
Right.
And can be held accountable for their crimes.
40 years is a long time.
It is.
Did he end up serving the full sentence?
He actually ended up serving about 17 years in U.S. prisons.
Wow.
Before being extradited to France. Where she faced additional charges related to money laundering.
Wow.
After serving time there.
Yeah.
He was eventually extradited back to Panama in 2011 to face charges for human rights abuses committed during his rule.
So even after his time in the U.S.,
Yeah.
his legal troubles were far from over.
Not even close.
It sounds like he was constantly being shuttled between different prisons in different countries.
He was a wanted man.
A very well-traveled prisoner.
You could say that
Yeah.
it was a long and complicated legal saga
Right.
reflecting the global reach of his crimes and the many jurisdictions involved.
Yeah.
He ultimately remained in prison in Panama until his death in 2017 at the age of 83.
So that brings us to the end of Noriega's life.
The end of an era.
A life full of twists and turns.
Oh, yeah. Power.
Lots of power.
Corruption.
Plenty of that.
And ultimately, accountability.
In the end, yes.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. From Noriega's early days as a CIA informant to his dramatic downfall and the controversial U.S. invasion.
It really is a fascinating story.
It's a complex story with no easy answers.
Definitely not.
But I'm curious about your take on Noriega's legacy. How is he viewed in Panama today?
Well, it's a mixed bag, to be honest.
Really?
Some people, particularly those who benefited from his regime, still see him as a strong leader.
Interesting.
They might point to his efforts to renegotiate the Panama Canal Treaty with the U.S., arguing that he was trying to assert Panama's independence.
So there's a nationalist element to his legacy.
Absolutely. This idea that he stood up to the U.S., even if his methods were, shall we say, less than ideal.
Questionable at times.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for many others in Panama, Noriega's reign was a dark period marked by oppression, corruption, and violence.
Sure.
They remember the human rights abuses, the disappearances, the silencing of anyone who dared to oppose him. For them, the U.S. invasion, while controversial, was seen as a liberation.
Definitely a mixed bag, like I said.
So it sounds like his legacy is still very much a source of debate and division within Panama. What about on the world stage? How does Noriega fit into the bigger picture of U.S.-Latin American relations during the 20th century?
Well, his story really encapsulates the complexities and contradictions of that era.
How so?
You have the Cold War playing out with the U.S. and the Soviet Union vying for influence in the region.
Right.
And in the middle of it all, you have these smaller countries like Panama trying to navigate this geopolitical chess game and assert their own autonomy.
And often getting caught in the crossfire?
Unfortunately, yes.
It seems like Noriega was both a product of and a player in this larger drama. He used the Cold War to his advantage, playing the U.S. and the Soviets against each other.
He was a shrewd operator.
While also trying to consolidate his own power within Panama.
No doubt about that.
He was a master manipulator.
Oh, yeah?
There's no doubt about that. But his story also highlights the moral compromises that were sometimes made during the Cold War.
Absolutely.
The U.S. was so focused on containing communism.
Laser focused.
That they were willing to turn a blind eye to the corruption and brutality of leaders like Noriega.
It's true.
As long as they were aligned with U.S. interests.
As long as they were on the right side of the Cold War.
Which, as we've seen, can have some pretty disastrous consequences in the long run.
It's a cautionary tale.
It's a reminder that short-term gains often come with long-term costs. And that even the best-laid plans,
you never know,
can go awry when you're dealing with someone like Noriega.
Yeah, he was unpredictable.
And it also raises questions about the use of military force. Was the U.S. invasion of Panama justified? Did it achieve its goals? These are questions that historians and political scientists continue to debate to this day.
And we'll probably never have a definitive answer.
It's a reminder that there are often multiple perspectives on these complex historical events.
Absolutely.
And that what might seem like a clear-cut victory at the time can look very different in hindsight.
Hindsight's 20/20, right?
It's also important to remember that these events have real-world consequences for the people involved.
That's crucial to remember.
The U.S. invasion of Panama, while relatively short, resulted in loss of life displacement and lasting trauma for many Panamanians.
You can't forget about the human cost.
So while we might be analyzing Noriega's story from a historical perspective, it's crucial to acknowledge the human cost of these events and the impact they had on the lives of ordinary people. As we wrap up this deep dive, what's the key takeaway you'd like our listener to consider? What's the most important thing we can learn from Noriega's rise and fall?
Well, I think it's the importance of critical thinking.
Okay.
Don't just accept the official narratives or the easy answers. Dig deeper. Question your assumptions and consider multiple perspectives. Noriega's story is a reminder that history is rarely black and white. And that the truth often lies somewhere in the shades of gray.
That's a great point. And it's a reminder that history isn't just something that happened in the past. It's a living, breathing thing that continues to shape our world today.
Absolutely.
So by understanding the past, we can gain a better understanding of the present.
For sure.
And make more informed decisions about the future.
That's the goal.
Well, I think we've given our listener plenty to think about today.
A lot to unpack.
From Cold War intrigue to U.S. foreign policy.
It's all connected.
To the enduring complexities of Latin American history.
A fascinating region.
Noriega's story is a fascinating window into a turbulent and transformative period.
And his story is just one piece of a much larger puzzle.
It's a story that continues to resonate today.
Without a doubt.
Reminding us of the power of individuals to shape history.
Yeah.
The unintended consequences of our actions.
Always a factor.
And the importance of seeking justice and accountability.
Crucial.
No matter how long it takes.
It's worth the effort.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Always a pleasure.
We hope you've enjoyed this journey through the life and times of Manuel Noriega.
Me too.
And remember, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.